Welcome to Energy Innovations, a regular video series that explores the latest innovations in technology, digital, regulations, products, services, finance, and business models that are impacting the energy sector. Energy Innovations interviews entrepreneurs, energy companies, capital markets, and regulators to understand how the energy industry is changing.
Welcome to Energy Innovations. My name is Geoffrey Cann, and today I want to explore the very hot topic of cyber as our energy industry transitions, as we deal with decarbonization, as we confront digital transformation, as we enrich our energy world with more technology. We are creating a bigger landscape for cyber criminal activity. And I want to kind of explore this topic in some depth so that we kind of begin to expose some of the challenges that we are going to be facing. And to do that, I've invited Cara Wolf to join me on Energy Innovations today. Cara is a specialist in the world of cyber and cyber issues. And so, Cara, welcome to Energy Innovations today.
Oh, wonderful to be here, Geoffrey. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's begin with this sort of critical question about preparation. How prepared is the energy industry today to deal with cyber issues and cyber attacks?
I would say moderately prepared. As cyber attacks get more sophisticated and the rate and intensity increases, our oil and gas companies are not keeping up with the latest tools, with training, with the proper corporate structure, and with adopting innovation and building Canadian-built cybersecurity solutions to fight the ongoing cyber attacks. So in my opinion, we've got some basic firewalls in place, some basic training in place, and some basic cyber awareness training. But we really do have a long ways to go to increase our cyber posture in order to protect and defend our corporations from imminent attacks.
And any sense as to what the costs are to industry because of this inadequate level of preparation?
Well, it's interesting that you'd ask that, Geoffrey, because I just pulled some stats this morning just to see where we've been. And it's an estimated, cybercrime is estimated to cost industry $20 billion in 2022, which is a 57% increase or 57 times increase over 2015. The average size of a small and medium-sized enterprise is $170,000 for ransomware. It's over 500,000 ransomware for larger corporations, and then we get into the millions. Colonial Pipelines, for example, was $5 million. And a ransomware attack is hitting businesses now at a rate of 1 every 11 seconds. And it is estimated that cybercrime is going to cost $10.5 trillion by 2025. So these rates and statistics are quite alarming at the very least.
And my sense, though, is based on the limited exposure I've had to organizations who have shared with me their cyber challenges, is that the $100,000 cost, which is the ransomware payment that you might have to make to free your resources, actually significantly understates the actual true cost in lost productivity, loss of management attention, and so forth. If you were to elaborate or stretch that sort of base number, what is the real consequence to a business when it gets hit by a cyber effect?
It would be at least 10 times. I mean, it isn't just lost productivity. You think about it, and the organization has a cultural or psychological component to it as well, because you've been victimized. So whoever it was that maybe clicked the link on the phishing email, or maybe was social engineered into doing something that they didn't want to do, creates a victimization. And when you have to pay that ransom in order to get your data back, that's also there's a psychological impact. And there's that ongoing debate. Do you pay it? Do you not pay it? And you take your chances. If you do pay it, do you get the decryption key? Does it work? Does your name go on the dark web as somebody that does pay it, so you get hit again and again and again? Yeah, all of those things happen. So the true cost is very difficult to quantify, because Once you pay that, you set yourself up to pay yourself again, again, again. And it's not just productivity. I mean, your data could be lost completely. The corporate espionage piece is very legitimate and valid. So your IP could be going into the hands of your competitors or, international state-sponsored actors. So you can lose all those years and decades, in some cases, of extremely sensitive IP. So it's not just $100,000 ransom payment that you're losing. You're losing on a whole number of fronts that can't be totally quantified, but it is much, much more than the $100,000 by orders of magnitude.
Now, I'm sure some listening to this will say, well, my data is encrypted. And so sure, you may have taken my data, but it's encrypted, so you can't crack it. Is that a fair basis to assume that your resources are protected?
No, it's not at all. And in fact, I would shake my head at that. I mean, quantum computing and the ability to decrypt encrypted databases and data is just around the corner. So there's an arms race going on now. And once quantum computing capabilities come into play, it's basically going to crack the internet. So everything that's encrypted can be decrypted very quickly. So even though your data is encrypted, they've got troves and troves just sitting and waiting. And as soon as they have the compute capability to crack that, they're going to.
They're going to go after
and
it,
then
yeah.
that becomes open for everyone. So saying that, I think, is naive and irresponsible and negligent.
Sorry, I don't mean to be naive, irresponsible, and negligent, but I had to ask the question. So, but one thing I do know about these tools, cyber tools in particular, I believe they are based on the same technology that companies can use in their day-to-day running of their business: artificial intelligence tools and machine learning tools and sensor technology. So you described it as an arms race. Is that what's going on here? Are the activists, the cyber criminals, able to use the same technology as we are? Are we pitting, their tool against our tool? And is that the way to think about this?
Exactly what's going on. Yeah, exactly. And it's, people can't get the jobs that they want to get in industry, which pay them, and they turn to crime because it's much more lucrative. Or they work for hostile states, and they're very, very well funded. So even though the tools are there, you have to have the know-how in order to know how to use those tools. And for example, the Russians are teaching kids at 10 years old how to hack a satellite or how to hack an ATM. Our kids are playing hockey. So this is a huge problem because we aren't investing in training our people on the latest and greatest tools. So although the tools are available, we don't have the people or mentality or capability to use those tools. And we're not paying the people that do know how to use them appropriate market rates. And, I'll give you an example, like, the Google and Facebook's Meta of the world, they pay their team leads $1.8 million US in salary. We wouldn't even look at that as a salary in Alberta. And I think there's a big wake-up call that this expertise is in high demand and it needs to be paid at market rates. So you're not going to pay somebody, a junior analyst, $80,000 or $100,000 a year and expect them to be able to defend and protect an enterprise. They're outmanned, they're outgunned, and they're still toddling on how to use these tools. We need people with 20, 30 years experience that have been doing this for decades, that know their stuff, that can teach and train. And we don't have that in our infrastructure here because everybody good gets soaked up by the Americans very quickly.
Well, we also have a cultural norm which frowns on this sort of activity. And there may be other cultures or other parts of the world where the investigation capability to identify and detect and shut down that kind of activity is much more lax than it is here. And so perhaps that's another challenge. But so you've talked about a few things. So we don't resource it properly. The pay grade for people who know how to do this is rising rapidly because in the tech industry. Are we creating a gap here? Because as we add, capability and technology into our energy landscape, are we just making our situation potentially much worse because of the scale here of the gap that's hitting us?
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
I think we're failing on a number of fronts, and it starts with education. So the post secondaries aren't teaching cybersecurity as a function of the computer science degrees, for example, right out of the gate. It's taking too long to train people up. 4 years, 2 years, that's too long. And when they do get out of university, they need a lot of mentorship and guidance, and we don't have it, and they're not getting it. And companies aren't investing in upskilling and retraining people that are already working in the industry. So the security people we have right now, they're not trained in artificial intelligence tools. That's a whole different subset, and that's a different type of expertise. So we've got multiple facets within the cybersecurity industry of skill sets, and we're not investing quickly enough into our people and into the processes in order to use the technologies and understand the data that we're even trying to protect. A lot of companies are still trying to identify what their assets are. They haven't even done an asset inventory yet.
Yeah.
So that rests on leadership. That rests on the board of directors. That rests on the senior executive. And we're starting to see the really good companies are putting a chief information security officer at the table with the CFO, the CIO, the CTO, the CEO. And the CISO has power and authority to direct the business units on how to enforce good posture and good cyber hygiene. And with the constant evolution of privacy laws and changing, moving environment there, we need to stay up to date in those areas. And that's in terms of policy. And we don't have that here yet. Governance, risk, and compliance officers are still few and far between. And those are all job functions that it's a have to have now. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have.
Yeah, they frequently report up to the financial officer because risks and controls historically will have been largely placed around the monetary assets of a company. And this is a whole new world we're in, where actually your biggest vulnerability might not be that someone can get your money, but rather they're able to steal your data. And so I think there's good logic that says changing how we think about the oversight of these risk matters now needs to be reflected and revisited. There's so many places where vulnerabilities could happen. Everything from telecommunications links, specific sensor technology. Are there parts of energy infrastructure which are uniquely vulnerable or are specifically vulnerable where there are very clear weaknesses we should be addressing really quickly?
Well, I'll just start with sensors. I mean, we have trillions of sensors of all different kinds out there in the field, and they're made by hostile nations, and they could easily have backdoor surveillance malware installed in those sensors, and we would never know. And the only way to protect is by building our own sensors, which means we need to create an ecosystem where we build Canadian instead of buy the cheapest. So it comes down to money. So we really just need to replace the sensors. We also know that the communication links and the communication is being surveilled. And there are surveillance tools now that hide the tracks. So for example, the Russians can listen in on all of the conversations and communications that are going in between. And the possibility of AI is that they can inject malicious code into those communications to trick the sensors into thinking that something is happening that's not happening. So in terms of the oil and gas industry, if you think of a methane detector and it's giving off a read and it's saying it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, and or it's not safe, it's not safe, it's not safe, and the Russians inject code that says it's safe, I mean, that could cost lives, right? That could kill people. So, there could be catastrophic life failure there. And that exists now. So artificial intelligence tools are actually fighting artificial intelligence tools.
Tools.
So there's a lot there. And I think that we're just starting to wrap our heads around the real threat. And a lot of people still have their heads in the sand thinking, oh, they won't pick on us and they're not interested in us. And you're darn right they're interested in us. We get threats on an ongoing basis on our national critical infrastructure. And we need to rely on Canadian expertise to defend and protect. We can't be always relying on the Americans and the UK. The last good, great story I heard was BlackBerry. That was a long time ago. We've got some good companies that are coming up that are getting funded at the seed level, but not nearly enough, and not enough money. So we need to be co-developing, co-creating, co-collaborating, sharing in the risk, sharing in the IP, and sharing in the commercialization. And we really do need to be working closely with the startup and innovation community to bring these tools into reality now. Not after you've been hacked, not after somebody dies, but now to prevent and protect what we've worked so hard to create and build for our country.
You mentioned earlier that this, tools against tools, and an attack every 11 seconds. This is an extraordinary pace. I would hypothesize that these are not people actually doing this. People have, the criminals have set up their own robots, if you like, whose sole purpose is to go looking for points of vulnerability. That's what logically would be happening here. Is that real? Is that am I wrong
For
there?
sure. Yeah, no, they have bots that are, yeah, they do. And that's all they do. And they've created all kinds of tools for nefarious activities.
Yes. Yeah.
And so these bots just look for vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So the logic that says I'm small, I'm obscure, I'm out of the way, that doesn't work because the bots will find you. To think that your communications are, again, out of sight, distant, and remote, that doesn't work because the technology exists to listen in on the communications. The idea that you will, your small team of well-intentioned people that are protecting you are actually able to withstand the pressures coming from these very, very well-funded organizations isn't sound thinking either. So I guess the summary here is that we do face a lot of threats. It's getting worse, and we need to be investing more and more quickly into our cyber protections. What if you had to kind of forecast, where this whole world of cyber goes? I mean, the track we're on doesn't look very promising. Are we? Is there a future state out there where you could say, "Hey, don't worry, it'll get better," or is that really a pipe dream at this point?
Yeah, it's a pipe dream. I don't think it's getting better. All the statistics say it's getting worse. There's a lot of money in ransomware, and so the mentality has to shift. Instead of playing Russian roulette, so to speak, it's not if, it's when. And so you should make it as difficult as possible to penetrate your organization. And if you think of it like a house, if your house is got a full alarm system, it's lit up at night, you've got bars on your windows and it's locked up and your doors are locked, and your next door neighbor leaves the front door open, who are they going to rob? And so I think we have a responsibility to be investing in the infrastructure, investing in the people, investing in the training, and making sure that we've got our defenses are fortified. And when I hear companies that don't even know what data they have to protect, and they're still trying to figure out their data, and these are very well known large enterprises, it shocks me to see that this is still the state of being where we are, because it's like taking candy from babies.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see that happen to our organizations. And every day you're hearing about a high profile hack, and there's no real need for it. We need to be responsible. We need to invest. We need to stop the turf wars and really just understand how to take calculated risks. Burying your head in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist is not a strategy.
Yeah.
It is not a good strategy.
Certainly not going to work. Not in this landscape. I can imagine, and I've heard this excuse a few times actually when I talk with organizations that are confronting digital innovation in particular, that the threat of cyber activity is now so great that the right answer is to do nothing. Don't invest in transformation. Don't rethink the business. Don't involve yourself with the metaverse and all of these other novel ideas. Is that the right answer in this instance either, or is that doesn't sound very smart thinking?
No, that sounds to me like a company going bankrupt. That's a horse and buggy company. You need to run towards digital transformation. Digital transformation should have happened 20 years ago. So the fact that there are companies still trying to get off paper, it just shakes my head. They don't deserve to be in business, in my opinion. There's no excuse for it. We have these tools. We have the ability to enhance human performance. It's irresponsible not to. Saying, oh, well, we're just going to get hit anyway, so I'm not going to invest any money. I like that mentality doesn't even render itself intelligent. So if you're hearing that intelligent, or you're hearing that kind of commentary, I would suggest that person or those that management team that's saying that should be retired, because that's a very old way of thinking. I would, that just would upset me to no end to know that my company, my hands are, or as a shareholder too, of, that's the mentality is, oh, we should just never do that and just maintain status quo. I would dump those shares so fast that it just shouldn't even be in the realm of conversations at all.
So despite the threats and the risks here, standing still is just flat out not an answer either. So one of the challenges of energy in particular is our legacy infrastructure is so vast. There are 1 million wells in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. The vast majority of them were pre-drilled or put into production long before cyber attacks on industrial infrastructure began happening on an industrial scale. How do those organizations deal with this issue? And some of that old technology can't even be patched. It's like it's not it's not ready for this world. What should they be thinking about? Should they be selling those assets off and letting somebody else deal with it? Should they be shutting them in, or should they be upgrading them so that they can participate in this newer world?
Well, you're going to have to do a cost benefit analysis. So I'm all for upgrading. Selling it off to leave it to someone else as their problem, well, I think that's a cop-out. Unless you don't have the capabilities or the timeline in order to upgrade them. There's so much innovation going on in town here with small startups, and a lot of them have built solutions that can be integrated into legacy systems, and they're not being invested in, and they're not being looked at, and we're not getting the trials and the pilots that we need. So I'd be looking at start looking at the accelerators and the incubators, and start looking at the universities and saying, what do we have here? Like, we've got a lot of very smart, young, talented people that have great ideas, and how can we adapt that? And how can we help facilitate that collaborative relationship so that we can grow these startups and we can help ourselves at the same time? So, give the challenge to the accelerators, give the challenge to the universities, and say, hey, we've got these legacy systems and we need this, and what can you build and what can you design? But fund it properly. You can't do it on beer and pizza. This needs to be funded with hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So fund it properly and work collaboratively. And the ingenuity in Alberta is second to none. We're pioneers, we're innovative, we're tough, we have a lot of grit, and we can solve any problem, but it needs to be properly funded in real dollars, in realistic timeframes. And that is a leadership issue. And so leadership needs to understand how to build and create. So, for example, I'm from here, and we grew up with the wildcatting and the pioneers, and everybody threw money in a hat. Everybody took the risk. And sometimes you had a dry hole, and sometimes you got a gusher. and everybody understood that, and they put money into it. And now we've got, the second or third generation of leadership that have been operators. They've never been explorers or innovators or adventurers. And so we have a bunch of operators that need to get that passion back and need to learn how to be pioneers, and they need to get that, fire in their belly to go out and conquer and learn how to be startups and innovators. So there's a whole different mindset between operators and innovators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can certainly see the consequence of this. I call it the distinction between working on the business and working in the business. And an operator works in the business; they just run the business day in and day out. But now's the time to work on the business, to embrace the digital innovations, because you don't have a choice. At the same time, to strengthen the cyber defenses, because the digital change is creating the cyber opportunity. And I think you're right. The history of success can breed a level of complacency around the possibilities presented by the future. And so now's the time to not be complacent, to embrace that. I think that's really important. So aside from investing in funding, what are the other sorts of things that a business today operating in the energy industry, what can they be doing to improve their cyber profile so that they're able to, be more resilient or able to withstand the potential attacks they may be facing?
Well, there's twofold. So you can do your internal vulnerability assessments and pen tests, but I think you need to hire external as well. It's just as important to hire third-party experts. You're not going to get the same answer from your internal team as you will from your external team. And especially in cyber, there's a huge trust issue. So people don't want to bring people from outside. They're embarrassed, or they're not trusting. They're afraid that they're going to be taken advantage of. But for example, like our company, we have defense experts with 30 years of applied AI experience building cyber tools. You're not going to get that in an internal oil and gas company. That expertise is outside, and you want that lens to work with your security teams to bring that capacity up to make your security posture stronger. So the aversion to bring in outside support needs to be reduced. There are things you can do to reduce the risk through contracts and liabilities, but you should be talking to outside third parties and getting an objective lens. And you're going to go through a process where you're going to go learn something. So it's not a threat to your internal team. It's an addition to your internal team. And again, that comes from leadership. It is not to take the place of the CIO or the CISO. It's to add value and enhance the strength, like you would any outside external consultant. So hiring outside, I think the proper outside expertise and properly funding that, I think it is critical to strengthen all corporations.
Yeah, and I
So
think
investing internally, but also investing externally.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. There's the capability and skill level required to be competent in this domain now has outstripped the casual do it on the side of your desk. We're up against pros here. We have to get the pros in to support you. Cara, thank you very much for sharing your perspectives today on this very, very rapidly evolving world of cyber. I think the important takeaway messages for me are that we can't ignore this. At the same time, you can't stop moving forward. So somehow we have to find the ability, the wherewithal to do both. And that's the pathway to success here.
I agree. And, we need to support Canadian builds. So we need to support Canadian startups, Canadian innovators, Canadian builds, and externals. So we need to do that. And we used to do it a lot more than we do now, and I'd like to see that back again.
Come back again, yeah. Thank you again, Cara, for coming on Energy Innovations today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
This has been another episode of Energy Innovations. If you like what you've heard, please press the like button, leave a comment, and share this with your network. And for more information on energy innovations, please visit energynow.com/energy innovations. And I'll return with another episode very, very soon.